Well, it is that time of the week once again. Welcome on into Jay's Sports Bar. Shane Williams-Rhodes alongside myself. Boise State continues this up and down season so far. Started out with a loss, bounced back with a win, followed that with a loss, then got a win, followed by a loss win, and now we have hit the loss column yet again. Boise State is locked in one of their more adverse seasons, we'll call it. In a long time. They sit at 3-4 as we brace for the final weeks of October here, Shane. And as a guy that was in the Brotherhood, something that Andy Avalos long emphasizes, I'm just kind of curious. What is your take? What is your reaction? Because I've heard from a number of alumni this week that have shared their thoughts on this thing, but I'm curious, obviously, what yours are.
A lot of mixed emotions. Everything is just everywhere, man. I don't know. I feel like you're just seeing it on all ends. You're seeing it from, how this place was left when Harsin left. You're seeing it on how the new coaching staff is trying to, juggle what they have and what their scheme, what they had to do as far as the roster, injuries, and then I guess it's a lot of stuff going on right now, and obviously this fan base isn't used to having to deal with these type of pain. I don't think anybody knows exactly where to blame.
I still, for the record, really like a lot of the things that Andy Avalos is preaching. I like what he's doing over there. One reason why I have some type of belief in that too is that a lot of the players mention that, and it's unprovoked. They bring up how much they love him, they like playing for him. A couple of weeks ago, Tim Plow went on about a 90-second, little spiel there about how much Andy means to everybody over in that facility, and sometimes, the results don't necessarily align with what they're trying to achieve. 4 losses is indicative of that, but they still like him. They want to play for him. I will say this though, like Shane, this is hard because I'm not inside the football facility. You are no longer inside the football facility. So we are kind of left to speculate about what's going on. I don't love speculation, but we don't talk to Andy Avalos until Monday when he kicks off his weekly press conference for this Colorado State week. So that's kind of just what we're left to do at this point in time, I suppose. We'll do our best to be fact-driven. And on that note, the last time we did talk with Andy, he brought up that there were players that were late to meetings leading up to the Air Force game, which they lost, 24-17. There were long droughts there where the offense just could not operate. We've seen that happen in a number of games so far this season. So I'm not just curious about your reaction to the loss. I'm curious about your reaction to players showing up late to meetings. Like when you were a Boise State football player, you played under Chris Peterson and Brian Harsin. Your tenure was almost split down the middle between both those guys. What would have happened if a player was late to a meeting during those respective tenures? Was it the same punishment? Did it differ? Was everybody on the same page that there was a punishment?
For the most part, I mean, if it's game week, you're late to meetings. Okay, let me check that. If meetings, typically they have some, you get punished by your position coach. I mean, if you're a repeat offender, you under Pete, you might have CT, what we used to call commitment time. So the way Pete used to do it was, if you were a guy, you're a repeating offender of being late to meetings, you have to attend CT. And what CT was, study hall. And I know opening out there like, okay, the guy's got to go to study hall. It's not there. But the way Pete structured this commitment time was that you had to go to CT from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Because after the game, the shower, because, back in this time, we played games all. Games were usually over, we played 7 o'clock games. So games usually over around 10. So you shower, you just go right on upstairs. And you're sitting in study hall with a coach for 4 hours. Obviously for a lot of folks who out there will listen, you obviously know that downtown closes at 2 p.m. So Yeah, you guys were not getting to have any types of fun that weekend. And I think the worst part about CT was obviously most of our guys on the roster are from California, from Texas, from Florida, and so what this meant was if you had family coming to watch you play, you had to basically tell your family, like, it was one or the other. You either had to lie to your family and tell them you weren't going to see them while they traveled across the country to come see you play, or you had to let them know I was late to meeting, so I got study hall and I can't see you. So I honestly don't ever complain about it. It probably happened at some point, but I feel like the parents understood, like, hey, you got CT. I mean, you committed to being the meetings and stuff on time, and this is your punishment. So I feel like the parents kind of liked it, but obviously, if it's your child, you might have a different say. But it was something that kind of kept everyone in line, and that's not something that you obviously want to have to tell your parents when they travel, spend all that money to come watch you play, and it helped us kind of stay in line because when you have seasons like this year and things like that haven't been happening all year, and then they randomly start happening, like people being late to meetings, the accountability side of things starts to go. It's not that being late to a meeting make you lose the game, but it's the accountability fact and the commitment fact where you said, like, you've been doing the same thing all year, never been late, but now we're late and you don't have 100% all in. That was something Pete kind of used to always talk about. He was be here now, and so when it's football time, like, be here on time, be all in 100% into what we're doing. And so if you're showing up late to meetings now because we're losing, then that just means and if no one's saying anything and then that just means it's gonna happen. You miss a block. We're not holding you accountable. We're just gonna kind of start letting things slide by. And so I'm glad Avalos has kind of put a grapple on that and kind of came out about it, just so I feel like it's going to help the rest of the players kind of stay accountable and stay the course, because it's real easy on years like this to get. I mean, yeah, this year is bad. I want to say more year we lost more games than these years. So I know that it can be rough, but the ship can be righted. It's not over.
Yeah. So CT, commitment time. That was basically the punishment if you were late to a meeting. My follow-up to that, again, was that the same standard during the Chris Peterson and Brian Harsin eras? And during your time, like, was it common to have a few guys late for, throughout the course of the season for meetings? Or was it just like it barely ever happened? Where do we stand on that, in the previous 10 years of Boise State?
So yeah, Hars actually continued CT. It was a thing that was there when he was there originally, so he was familiar with it. We were familiar with it, so it's something that kind of continued. I do think that when Harsh got there, you didn't see as many guys get it because new staff. You don't want to be the guy to kind of step out of line with new staff. Everybody gets a clean slate. You get to start from ground zero, and so I think guys are kind of more in line. The Pete years, first year, we had guys getting in trouble and things. So we saw some guys, some field issues, some guys get that. It was rare guys CT for missing meetings and being late to meetings. That wasn't something that was a thing usually.
Well, now it is a thing with this current staff. It's interesting because you said, like, when Harsin came in, it was a new staff. Everybody wanted to, they had a clean slate. They wanted to start off good, start off fresh. And it doesn't seem like everybody's batting 1,000 on that mission right now over there at Boise State, because, again, it happened a couple of times, it sounds like, in leading up to that last Air Force game. And again, we are just taking what Andy Avalos said in his post-game press conference and addressing it basically at this point, because that's all the information we have. I followed up with, reiterating if he had guys late to meetings, and he basically was just kind of short in his response, saying, we're moving on, Jay, at this point in time. And so that's fine. He wants to keep that in house. We don't necessarily know which players were late. Don't know if there was a punishment or anything like that, to be honest with you. But we do know that it obviously is affecting the team to the point where Andy Avalos continues to reiterate now that they're trying to reestablish the foundation, reestablish the culture of what made Boise State great for a 20-year run that is unprecedented in college football history, especially for a Group of 5 school. This is the year. This is the down year, the rebuild year, the regroup year, whatever the heck you want to call it. But we have finally hit the point in time where we can't just assume that Boise State is going to have a 10-win season. At this point in time, I mean, I hope I'm not being too critical, but I'm having a tough time thinking like we can assume anything over 500 at this point. Like they still have New Mexico on the schedule. They aren't very good, but I'm not sold on going to Colorado State and hosting Wyoming as easy victories yet. And outside of that, you have road trips at Fresno State and San Diego State. Like Boise State has already played an unbelievably challenging schedule, and it really doesn't get that much easier from here on out because the Aztecs are ranked, and Fresno State at one point in time prior to an upset on the island was ranked as well. So it certainly doesn't get a lot easier. I know you said that they can right the ship. There's time in the season. There was a player dismissed this week. And again, we're just kind of getting back to what we know and the facts. At this point in time, what we know about C.T. Thomas's dismissal is that he's no longer a part of the Boise State football team. That's all that Boise State athletics released at this point in time. Reaching out to CT, he declined further comment, said he was grateful for the city of Boise, the fans, all of that stuff, but didn't want to go into it any more than that. And I can respect that at this moment in time. It is interesting, though, that a player that has over 120 career catches wasn't getting the same playing time or volume of catches this year is dismissed the same week where Andy Avalos is saying that he needs to reestablish the foundation that made Boise State great. I mean, can you think of a time during your career at Boise State, Shane, where somebody was booted through the process of the season, through the course of the season, and removing that subject made things better? And I don't even want to necessarily say that removing CT will make things better, but clearly they did it for a reason. So can you think of an instance like that where there was a player that was removed where it made things better? I know that might be an awkward that might be an awkward question for you to answer.
I don't know if I ever experienced something like that, at least for the same reasons of why we believe why this happened. I know we guys, this some guys who had some household names but I think what that kind of does as a head coach when things like that happen, it just kind of shows that, no one's irreplaceable, and that we at this point we rather uphold the culture than to allow people to step out of line and do things that aren't the standard.
So maybe that's the first step forward here. If you need to reestablish the foundation, I guess maybe you have to get everybody's attention. And I'm not saying that was the sole intent of this move of removing a player from the team, but either way, like considering the success that CT has had at Boise State, like it definitely woke me up. Like, wow, that's a big move. And maybe that's what you need to get everybody's attention, to show, as you said, that nobody is irreplaceable. And we can only judge the benefits of it if it actually works against Colorado State. Does the team come out and play better? I will say this, though, like removing the guy from the team that only had, a handful of catches this season specifically, I mean, that's not the fix-all here. Like, that's not. This is just – Andy Avalos said time and time again that a lot of small things have added up into big things. Well, now you try to reverse that course where a lot of small things add up to big things in a positive fashion, I guess. And this is just a small step forward maybe in reestablishing the culture. But it is just weird. And, man, Shane, I don't know. I never thought that I would be here long enough to see 3 straight losses on the blue. It used to be absolutely unfathomable. I mean, can you imagine that? I do know that one time you had to deal with back-to-back losses on the blue. Air Force in New Mexico came in here in 2016, I believe. And, they back-to-back losses on the blue, and that was awkward at that moment in time. But that was still a team that went 9-4. So to lose 3 straight on the blue, I mean, that something was unheard of. And we talk about, the mystique of the blue and like how much it means. Like that slide has got to stop, because you're trying to preserve what is arguably the greatest home field advantage, the most unique playing surface that is in college football. And there are stats that justify that. Like Boise State is ridiculously good at home. And don't tell me they're just a group of 5 program, because why hasn't there been some other group of 5 program that has sustained similar success for even 5 years, let alone 20?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it's a really, really awkward conversation to have. Like you said, I never thought we would be having this conversation. I mean, we knew going into the air game it was going to fun. It always did, as we said last week. But yeah, it's something that just every Power 5 or Group of 5 school can do, because, like you said, everyone would always win at home if that was the case. It's the atmosphere, and what's always been is been about the program and the culture that we usually have around here. And that's what Avalos is. That's what he's trying to get back to, and that's really what the move. I'm guessing what CT was more about. It was more about the program rather than the team in general is on the field. Because if you have a young guy who's here right now who plays receiver and he's upset about the season 2, you rather set that tone with that senior and that guy who's played a lot and seen a lot of things, and basically you're showing those younger guys that, hey, if you don't buy in and you don't uphold what we've created already, then you're going to be out of here. And so I think that helps keep those guys in line, and I think that's really what that's about. And I help get to our standard.
And I will add this, though. CT always enjoyed talking with CT. And I know as recently as last year, I believe that he was even kind of on a leadership council that it only included, 10, 15 players. I mean, there was a point in time here where CT did, carry a significant role when it came to leadership. And this is just obviously a 180 from that. Like, didn't necessarily see it coming, especially in the midseason, and especially after, CT didn't necessarily have to be here this year. He made the decision to come back. Last year was his true senior year. CT played as a true freshman. He got the COVID eligibility back basically this year, so he returned for his 5th year. But it just went nothing the way most people probably envisioned it, especially himself. And now he's done playing at Boise State. Had a heck of a career. He's a father. His little girl is as cute as can be. I feel bad for him. But I wish him the best, without a doubt, because he always gave us great. He always gave us his time. Was always a great soundbite. Always very generous. So we'll see what is next for him. But focusing on what's next for this football team, how hard is it to go into a bye week feeling like this, Shane? How do you start to change the mood of this? Because regardless, Boise State has to sit here with a 3-4 record. For now, they still have another week before they get a chance to correct that thing. And so how hard is it going to be for that group of guys to get back in a positive mindset that can start to build not only this season, but past this season?
I'm going to be honest. I would hate to be a player right now, because just imagining the weeks where, with Pete and with Hars, having to go into a following week, just coming off of a loss period. So, just coming off of a loss, the next week in practice, it's rough. Like the coach and the coaches are, for all things and those times. Well, these guys are coming off of, a bad loss, and on top of that, they have to do it for 2 weeks. So whatever it is that is going to, not going to first week, they're going to do this for 2 weeks, and all they're going to hear all week is about details, and about where they are. They're going to remind them, you're 3-4, you're not even 500. So that's going to be these guys all week. It's some rough 2 weeks for these guys. I would not want to be in that locker room right now.
So, in fall camp, there's always like this storyline. Like the first 2 weeks of fall camp, it's all about working on the, yourself, your team. Boise State working on Boise State. And then you get to a point in fall camp where it's like, okay, now we start to prepare for our opponents, namely that opening opponent, your opening opponent. I still feel like we're at the point, despite the fact being 7 games in the middle of the 8th week of the season now, that I still feel like Boise State is spending a lot of time trying to figure themselves out. Do you kind of feel that at all, Shane?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if it's the fact that, the coaching staff is fairly new. I don't know, what it is. like we said, threes. Us just trying to figure out. Yeah, like you said, we're trying to figure out who we are still, and
Yeah.
it's tough. It's not a good
I
spin
mean,
in week 2 of the season.
yeah, it is what it is at this point because I mean, this is where we're at. Typically, again, in kind of a normal Boise State season, it seems like we get to that like third game, and all of a sudden you hear like, okay, this is what we figure out we do well. This is what we can identify with. This is how we move forward to how we feel we best can win games, and it still feels like we are trying to find that with this specific football team. So, how hard is it when you're this late into the season, still spending time on yourselves in a given game week? And maybe I'm over exaggerating or yeah, over elaborating, whatever here, Shane. But in a given game week, when you're preparing to take on whoever, how much time would you typically spend on yourselves, and how much time do you spend preparing for that opponent,
And
for your next
in a
opponent?
typical week.
Yeah,
So if we played
and lay
Saturday,
and lay it out
Sunday is
like in a percentage wise too. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but is it like 20% on yourselves, 80% on opponent? Is it way more closer to a 50-50 split? Like, where is that?
I'd say, so let's just break it up. So let's say it's 5 days. So after you play on Saturday, you come in Sunday. Sunday is all about you. So that's
Right.
the day that's about Boise State. Focus on Boise State. You're watching the film from the last game. You're correcting the mistakes that you had in the last game. So then that's what they to go over. Like, all right, this is who we are. This is the standard. Boom. We're correcting it. You do all that. You go walkthroughs. You do walkthroughs on corrections of what you did messed up on last game. Monday is off. Tuesday, it's all about the next opponent. It has nothing to do with Boise State at this point. We fixed our corrections from last week. We're going forward. This is how we need to do it. So like Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, those are all for the next opponent. Those have anything. So I'd say 20% after the game is about Boise State the next day after, and then you get that day that you get off. That's kind of like your day to recover, your day to clear your mind, and then once you come out on Tuesday, it's next week it started basically. It's no more of us about the last opponent or us. It's about just all the focus is now state going forward. So that's typically how it is. But I think I guess that's a good thing about this bye week is they could probably spend maybe 3 days trying to figure out and getting back to the basics and figure out who they are, and then take up the rest of that time to focus on Colorado.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so much time in the day. And on top of that, there's only so much time that players can be required to be in the facility. So that's why this is so valuable here. Like, how much time do you have to spend focusing on yourself, and how much time do you get to focus on your opponent? And I'll reiterate, it just seems like Boise State, when you talk with them, are still trying to find themselves right now. What works for them? And week to week, it changes a little bit. It seems like they were getting really close after the BYU game. They slowed down tempo. They did that again to the best of their ability against Air Force. But then all of a sudden, late in that game, they were down 2 scores, and then they tried to pick the tempo back up. But they weren't really running offense at that point. They were running against a prevent that was letting them take, these short little 6-yard hitches or 4-yard outs or whatever it was. Because they didn't care if it took Boise State 5 minutes to get down the field. The bleeding clock was more valuable to Air Force than giving up ultimately a 3-point field goal. So they ended up getting the onside kick and the game changed. Boise State then turned the ball over immediately. So gosh, what like a microcosm of the season in that Air Force game. Like, not a lot goes your way, but then you're back in the game all of a sudden. You get lucky, you have life, and then you give life away basically by throwing an interception and making a mistake.
UCF all over again.
Yeah. So it's just it really is tough. And I think the thing that kind of hit me, I was walking out of work, after the news at 10 on Sunday night, and it's kind of late. And it just kind of hit me like, we don't know how to talk about the Boise State football team in this light, because we've never really had to talk about the Boise State football team in this light. Like, even in the past, when they had these losses or a loss, it was the following week they would win. And so there were, when it wouldn't really last, these feelings wouldn't linger. But now when we have this this pattern of loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. We're starting to get kind of accustomed to this feeling, and now we've done it 4 times, and it's only mid-October, and so it's just like we've never had to talk about him this way. We've never had to guess about him this way. So it's kind of tough for all of us to figure out how to move forward from here. How do they correct it? I almost want to back it up now and even talk about Andy a little bit here, because I can only imagine what he's going through. I mean, nobody probably out there wants to win more than Andy Avalos, namely because it's his responsibility to lead the program right now as the head coach. But he also played here. He was an assistant coach here. He's extremely passionate about this place. He's seen hundreds of players come and go throughout his 10 years at Boise State. But now it's up to him to figure this out. When Andy was an assistant coach here, like, was Andy the nice guy, or was Andy like the guy in practice that maybe kind of pissed you off at times because of how hard he'd go or something like that? You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't supposed to be even kind of like a negative, taken in negative context, but what kind of guy was Andy at like practice? And I know you weren't like in his position group, but you still got to see his position group.
For the most part, for me, like you said, I wasn't in his position group. He was the guy that just always had defensive side. Like, he was the defensive coach that always brought the energy to practice. Like,
yeah,
he wasn't ever a guy that was just kind of going through the motions. He was always high energy, always being active. And I actually recall talking to him this spring with a few of the, I was just asking him about the adjustment to being the head coach versus, being a coordinator, and kind of sorting things out, and, how I was a head coach, probably not around how you typically do as a defense coordinator, and your approach to practice is, and he was telling me that it's different. He said obviously he had seen quite a few guys run programs, with him being at Boise State, with him being at Oregon. And so he was saying it's as far as the difference was instead of, he said we felt like more when he's a coach, still had to set the tone. But as the head coach, you have to kind of allow your coordinators to, take control and be the one who likes to. His role now is more leading the coaches rather than leading the team, allowing the coaches to be coaches. And I think that's kind of how Pete used to be too. Pete was a guy who I hear the fire all the time. People always give me a hard time about my guy Robert Prince, about how he threw a lot of things and a lot of offense and how he liked to do things, and Pete never could understand why Pete never stepped in and chat, and but the reason was because he wants to allow his coaches to coach. He doesn't want to micromanage. We obviously know that has been done here in the past. That's not how Avalos wants to do it. He wants to, lead his coaches and allow his coaches to set the tone and develop their own style. So that's kind of where he stands and where he's at now. So I think this week they're going to get a little bit of the defensive coordinator Avalos out practice. That guy can bring it. So like I said, I wouldn't want to be in that position. These players are going to have to be in this week.
That makes sense. And see, that's kind of what I've heard about Andy. That's why, as crazy as this sounds, like, I know there's people out there in Bronco country that are questioning if he's going to work, but I still think he is, man. I still think he's the right guy for this job. I still think eventually we're going to get some great results. I really do. I don't know if they're necessarily going to come this year. Bronco Nation might have to be patient. This just might not be the year, but maybe it is just going to have to be a year to make it through and build and learn. And all of a sudden there will be a lot of benefits going into the off season. And then you get to hit the reset button and you're 0-0 next August. I don't know. As you said, there's still games to be played, because it is funny. I mean, in a typical Boise State year, you're still asking yourself, can Boise State run the table from here on out? Normally they wouldn't have 4 losses at this point. But to think it's undoable is probably, unrealistic, but they could, maybe, I don't know. But in order for them to come out of this bye and take a significant step forward, where is the disconnect that you want to see connect, Shane? Like, where is that, man? For me, I know that the offense, takes a lot of the blame this year, but these long droughts where they just don't operate, like those have got to go. The negative plays on offense, you have to eliminate them. And for me, like that's like any way possible. I don't care if you come out and run the wishbone. Like you have, obviously they're not going to do that, but you have to be able to eliminate all these negative plays that are setting your offense back. Like all of a sudden, Boise State in the game against Air Force, they're locked in a tight game. Hank takes off and picks up 9 yards on first down. He sets up a 2nd and 1. And then all of a sudden there's pressure off the backside. He's hit while throwing, but because it was early in his motion, he fumbles it backwards out of bounds. And all of a sudden now you go from 2nd and 1 to like 3rd and 16, just like that. And 3rd and 16 is, the drive's over. 3rd and 16, you don't convert that. And if you do, it's seldom. So that kills a drive. You only get 10, 11 possessions in a game, and you just gave one away, essentially. It's basically a turnover without sacrificing a ton of field position, I guess. But the offense they need to find a way to execute and operate more efficiently throughout a game. They can't have these long lulls where they can't move the ball or they turn it over or there's too many negative plays, and they have to eliminate these negative plays. I know the defense isn't perfect, but I still think that it begins with some of what's going on or not going on offense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. There's got to be some changes made. I've taken some heat here on Twitter for some of my suggestions, but I'm telling you, man, got to go back to my Alex Smith analogy. I feel this. You got Hank, man. He's winning, but he's losing the game typically, and it's Alex Smith. We go back to the BYU. He had 175 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Defense win. They get 6 turnovers. You go back to this game. He throws for maybe 250, but you go 1-1. An interception, a touchdown. You're not gonna get 4 or 5 downs and no interceptions. Honestly, if we have a guy who's throwing 4 and 5 touchdowns, I will take an interception a game. I'll take that if we're scoring 35 points on the offensive end. But you're not going to get that. And so I feel like our offense is designed, the way he wants to run it is a guy who can move a little bit. And I don't think that's what we have, So that's where I stand.
Yeah. I think one thing that I also took for granted at Boise State wasn't just the talent that you guys have had at running backs, but the durability that you guys had at running backs. So often we've talked about this 11 straight years with a 1,000-yard rusher, and we get caught up in the fact that they've been really good and really productive, but they've also had availability. Like you have to have a tremendous run really of luck and when it comes to health in order to do something like that. I think Doug Martin might have missed a game against TCU his senior year. Jay Ajayi, his junior year was as durable as ever. DJ Harper, by the time he was a senior, was pretty darn durable. Alexander Madison was extremely durable. And now the next was supposed to be George Nalani, and he can't really stay on the field. But where I'm going with this is like when times were tough in the past, Boise State could always just turn around and simply place the ball in the belly of one of their best players, if not their best player, just like that. And now you have to make an effort to get the ball to a guy like Khalil Shakir. It's just different. Like when you can turn around and give your best player the ball 25, 30 times a game, I think that's what got Boise State through some tough times in the past. And now they don't have that luxury. They can't lean on that. It would be great to see them get that back, but we're just waiting and hoping that George Nalani will be able to come back and resemble what we saw as a true freshman in 2019 when he led the nation in rushing yards as a true freshman. Cyrus Abibi-Likio was out against Air Force. They were kind of down to their 3rd, 4th, 5th string running backs against the Falcons, and they just don't have the same pop. Like I like Andrew Van Buren, but he is more of kind of that situational guy, great leader, great person. But to be the number one running back where you think you can make this huge impact and break off, maybe that explosive run. It's just not going to happen a ton. It's not. Like we have the sample size is large enough. Like it just is what it is. So I think that's also something that this Boise State team is missed dearly. Is just a healthy, productive running back. They can't lean on that right now. But also getting to your point, Shane, of doing what it takes to win this year, man. You've been given this certain deck of cards. It might be completely out of order. It might have some like random Uno cards in it that you got to get out of the pile. We all go camping like that once a year. I know I do with my wife, my little girl, and we pull out the box and all the Uno cards and all like the regular playing cards are all mixed together or whatever. So, you gotta weed through the deck, sort it all out, make it nice and neat again. And that's what this team is trying to do right now. It hasn't been super successful 7 weeks in, but they are trying. They're trying. What did like the alumni feel about this, Shane? I know you talk with guys that wore the blue and orange. One specifically that I spoke with was pretty agitated about losing this much on the blue. And granted, you guys aren't on the team right now. You don't know everything that's going on. There's factors that you can't add into this equation here. But how does everybody feel right now? Is there lost confidence? Are you searching for answers? Like what? How do the alumni, former players feel?
I know a lot of guys are frustrated. It's just we're in an unfamiliar place. Historically, when we have such a bad year, the next year is typically good. So I feel like me personally, as I'm just like I'm doing, down for a great uphill battle that we're gonna have next year, and I just 2022. I'm just hoping it's meaning that's gonna be brighter than what we thought it was gonna be, because there's nothing to be worse than what we're now.
Yeah, well, I'm actually glad you brought that up because you actually refreshed my memory and where I wanted to go with this. In 2013, Chris Peterson's last year at Boise State, that team went 8-5. The following year, you got a new head coach, and you go 12-2, and you win a Fiesta Bowl. And so we can see how quickly it can turn. What was wrong with that 2013 team that the 2014 team just seemingly got right?
Okay, so it's funny. I have to talk about this question and answer this question often. So the 2013 team had a rough year. We had 2 or 3 different quarterbacks that started that year. Like it goes back to your durability thing. So we had guys get hurt. A lot of when we get hurt. Roughly, we just kept turning the ball over. And then we lead up to a bowl game where I think one of the most chaotic situations I've ever been let me check that. Not that I've been a part of, but that my dad's where we go to a bowl game in Hawaii where half of the team has never even been, and we have a coaching staff we're used to having about 13 to 15 coaches, and we only have, I want to say we had 8 coaches, 7. So it was a little wild, and that one was just one of those things where I myself was injured. I know there was other receivers with me that was injured. We had guys hurt. We were playing with our quarterback. Guys home. This is gonna start, even though, but he got in trouble. He got sent home. It was just chaotic. So it was a lot of. So teams who didn't have a point, we didn't have any ability. Guys were just. There's a lot of stuff going on with that one. So then you get a new coaching staff come in, and this is what a lot of people fail to realize about that Fiesta Bowl team in 2014. I know we're like the stepchild of Fiesta Bowl teams. Anytime anybody asks me, did I go to the VS Bowl? I'm like, yeah. And then they always describe the first two, and I'm like, yeah, I wasn't in those. but uh, you have a coach walk into a situation where you have a quarterback who started, I want to say maybe 5-6 games already. You have a running, basically you have a top 5 running back in the country returning. You have your entire receiving core returning. Then you backdoor on that. On defense, you have the 2 guys that end up number 1 and number 3, maybe in the Mountain West in interceptions returning. I want to say out of the 22 guys we had, we returned probably 18. So we had a lot of guys back. And those guys, we all felt how it was last year, the year before, where, we had coaches leave and, guys not being accountable, not doing the right thing, all those things going into it. So we go in, your motivation into your off season is a lot different when you have been through some things and you know how things were when you didn't go all in and when you weren't accountable and you weren't doing the little small things the right way and how they caused you to finish out the season. It becomes a very veteran team, and we then coaches with new energy, and like I said, everyone's starting from ground zero. So, you have something to prove and those kind of things. And so that's huge. And believe it or not, we started our season off just how this team started off. We won the Fiesta Bowl. We were 3-2, and we had some bad losses. We had a loss with 7 turnovers. I think it might be one of the most turnovers I've ever been a part of in the game. It was bad. And honestly, we would have had 8 turnovers, I believe, but we threw an interception, and somehow, some way, I was able to strip the ball and get it back. And so that one didn't count against us because the play ended with us getting the ball. It was just a wild, it was crazy. The year started off.
Yeah.
And at that point, people were calling for all kind of things, people to be switched to positions and all kind. But we had to flip a switch, and then from there we went on a run, and that run wasn't how most people think it was. People think, oh, you just beat people like no other. No, I think we ended up beating teams. I think we beat Nevada by 3 or 4 points. We beat New Mexico by 3 or 4 points. We were down 20-0 at halftime against San Diego State at home, and came back to win maybe like 37-20. Like we had a lot of games where, a lot of games where it came down to small details deciding 3 and 4 points. And so it can be flipped around. It doesn't always take much. It's just, that mindset and just kind of going through those tough times, because it was bad. It was bad. I remember they told us we were the worst team to come through for the last 15, 20 years. So it was, we had to go through something to get something. So it was worth it for sure. I'd say that.
You're 8-5, and they told you you're the worst team to come through here in the last however many years. Unreal. You bring up some of the. I would say one of the defining moments of the Harsin era, or one of the defining things of the Harsin era. Every single year, it seemed like there was just a clunker of a game. That one game, it'd be Virginia on the blue, and they would lose by 20 some odd points. There was at Utah State in 15, where again, another turnover, a game where you guys turn the ball over 7 times or whatever it was, and you get doubled up by the Aggies. Like there was always that one game a year where it just wasn't even close. I will say the thing about this team is like there hasn't been that game yet. Like Nevada pulled away in the second half. It didn't seem super close, but at the end of the day, they've lost 4 games now, and their average and their total scoring margin in those games is they've been outscored by 23. So again, there's been times in the past where Boise State would lose a game by 23. This year they've lost 4 games by 23. So it's not that they're super far off. It seems they're trying to squeak by, but it's those little things that might be preventing it, I would say, at this point in time. So they got to figure all that stuff out. We prepare for the stretch run of the season. After the break or after the bye, back-to-back road game. So not a super easy task. At Colorado State the night before Thanksgiving, Christmas. I'll eventually get there. How about Halloween? The night before Halloween at Colorado State, then at Fresno State. They're not back at home until mid-November. They play Wyoming on December 12th, and 8 days later, they turn around and play New Mexico on the blue. That'll be senior night. They wrap up the regular season at San Diego State, a 10 a.m. game the day after Thanksgiving. I don't know who scheduled that, but that is a very, very tough kickoff. 9 a.m. and basically in the on the Pacific Coast. 9 a.m. They do get to play on CBS, so that is the reason why that's a significant opportunity. When Boise State played BYU on ABC, it was like the 7th most watched Boise State game or something, and I don't even know how many years or whatever, but they had great exposure. Maybe the 7th most watched of that weekend. I can't remember exactly. But the opportunities ahead of them to fix this, they just have to fix it. They have to make the most of the bye, recommit to the process, the foundation that has made Boise State great for so long. It's going to take patience from the fans, but it is what it is, and hopefully they understand as they try to move this thing forward. So do you think they'll get it done, Shane? I mean, like, what's your level of confidence? What do you think Boise State finishes record-wise? I know, we talk about, point spreads and lines on this show. What do you think Boise State finishes record-wise this year? Is that even fair to ask you? Or are you just going to say 9-4, or I guess 8-4 at this point? I mean, in all actuality, they're going to be a road dog at Fresno. They're likely going to be a road dog at San Diego State. They'll be favored against Wyoming and New Mexico on the blue. I'm interested to see the line on Colorado State. I assume Boise State will be slightly favored, although I think the Rams are kind of starting to find their own identity. They're playing much better ball of lately. 2 weeks ago, they really hung with Iowa, who at the time was a top 5 team in the country. What do you think is realistic from here on out?
Never thought I'd hear the day that I say this, man. I think we get 6 games this year.
Yeah, I think 6 games is kind of the reestablished, ceiling for this team. They got a chance if they can get one more. I mean, basically what we're saying there is they beat Colorado State as well as Wyoming and New Mexico, and they have a tough time against Fresno State and San Diego State. It means that Boise State would finish it with, here on out with an above 500 record, but overall they would just land at 500 for the season. Anything above that, I think, is a victory at this point, which means the Broncos could be staying at home to play on the blue in a bowl game.
The way this year has been, I don't know if we want to stay at home and play on the blue for a bowl game. We might need to change the scenery. Yeah, we might need to change the scenery.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
We'll see.
I mean, the San Diego State and Fresno are going to be some tough games. I watched Fresno play Oregon. I just thought a game that Fresno was going to win that game by 7, even though the turnover ratio was like 4. They were +4 or -4 in turnover ratio.
-4, yeah.
And they still almost won the game. So I don't know, man. But then I watched them play UNLV on TV, and it was just, or not UNLV. I'm sorry. They watched them play Hawaii, and it was a totally different team. So
yeah,
they got
a quarterback that can go though. They got a quarterback
that can sling the ball. So and they have receivers. Obviously, the receiver coaches, both of them over there, Kirby Moore and Taylor Pope, are Broncos. So those guys have the
running backs coach. Yeah, they got a few former Broncos over there that are now sporting.
Julius over there too. I think I saw him.
Yeah, he's there. Julius Brown. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, they got the receivers playing good, man. They got some elite. That's helpful. And the State game, I don't know if you watched their most recent game, but it was a dogfight, and they found some way to win this game with 2 fade balls in overtime. That's how they scored both overtime touchdowns, were fade balls. Yep. And that guy that was the leading receiver for the whole game, and he had 2 catches in the game, and then 2 catches in overtime. That's it. So I don't know. San Diego State's always going to be tough. If it get down to a defensive battle, I don't know if I like that, because those guys can run the ball. So
yep, they run the ball, and they do those seemingly those little things well.
Yeah.
that put them over the top. That's the reason why they're
We don't
ranked
we
at this
don't
point in time. Still
we don't do
undefeated
good
for
to
that
get
matter.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Shane, man,
So
it's been fun once again. Hopefully, we get this ship righted and we can talk with like that inflection in our voice. It's more exciting than that we're more accustomed to throughout the fall. Not the case at this point in time, but hope you enjoy the bye. Get to relax this weekend. Any plans? Like, do you just get to have fun, get away, or what?
yeah, it'll be no stress for me on Saturday. I tell you that. Gonna be able to enjoy college football and enjoy other teams getting upset than watching Boise State get upset at home every weekend. So
I agree with you. To everybody listening out there, just enjoy the college football weekend where it really doesn't matter what happens as it pertains to Boise State. We appreciate you tuning in. Until next week, he's Shane Williams-Rhodes. I'm Jay Tust. This is Jay Sports Bar, serving the Idaho sports community.